And we are living in a world wherein bridges are built, roads are built, connections are being made. And I think can from Globelics give a new perspective of building new bridges, roads in knowledge, because knowledge, as we firmly believe, is the most important resource of the modern economy. So can we think of building new roads and bridges in knowledge? We have an eminent panel to deliberate on this issue, which is going to be co-chaired by Sri K. M. Chandrasekhar, former Cabinet Secretary of Government of India, and he has held important positions at the national and international level, including India's ambassador to WTO. He, along with the Professor Luke Sute, will be co-chairing it. You are aware that Professor Luke Sute, through his enormous experience in the Lisbon process and other important academic positions that he held, he is most appropriate to do that. He said to log in. I hope he will be logging in. Equally important is we have a galaxy of experts. Professor Nagesh Kumar, former Executive Director of UNESCO for South and Southeast Asia. We have Professor Kyun, the Prime Minister's Economic Council Chair of South Korea. We have Godreshikesh Krishnan, the director of IIM Bangalore, and he was also formerly the director of IIM Indore and many other credentials. Professor Mamo Moshi, I would say the missionary from Africa, he is here, and he's a founding member of Globelics. Sujit Bhattacharya, NISTARS, an eminent academician, and of course, Priyadarshi Das. You know that from RIS has been doing an incredible job in terms of getting this G20 process. I welcome all of them and also request all the dignitaries, invite all the dignitaries to dais and discuss and request, please, all the panelists may please come to the dais. May I request Sri K. M. Chandrasekhar to initiate, and we know that we have to conclude the whole session by 1 o'clock so that our delegates don't go hungry. I know that he's very much concerned about your welfare. He will do that job. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, please.
Does this work? I think it works. Along with some screaming sound. Okay. Now it's come back. Nice and clear. So let me welcome all the panelists who are here. And let me welcome all the participants to this meeting. I congratulate Gulat Institute, not for this sound, but for having which mic? I think it's something wrong with that instrument. Is it okay now? Let's see. Yeah. Now, as I was telling some of the panelists, I think there is already enough expertise on innovation here. All of you have been talking of innovation. and all of you have a great deal of knowledge. We have a few panelists here. I just thought I will set the context, the global context in which we are talking of innovation or of any other subject, as a matter of fact. This morning, I was reading a speech given by my friend and colleague in Sydney on 9th October 23. It is the Lowy Institute Owen Harris lecture delivered by Shiv Shankar Menon, who was the former National Security Advisor of India. And I thought it was a very, very interesting speech. It's not received too much of publicity, but I've been circulating it around, and I hope people get to read it. Now, his opening sentence is, "Our world is adrift. It is between orders. We are in an era of great power rivalry and competition, and the balance of power is shifting. What we see around us is a world between orders where major powers disagree on their hierarchy and the rules of the system." I mean, this is, I think, really the situation, because in today's world, the integration that was taking place, particularly after the end of the Cold War, with the formation of the World Trade Organization, with greater emphasis on multilateral rules, that seems to be disappearing completely. And if you see the recent Hamas, Israel, Russia, Ukraine conflicts that have arisen, one hardly finds a role for the United Nations there. So far as the World Trade Organization is concerned, that is virtually extinct, because its teeth consisted of the dispute settlement mechanism, which is gone. There is no dispute settlement mechanism in place today. I think it's completely gone. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So this is the situation where we are standing today. And if this Hamas conflict develops still further, if you have Lebanon in the issue, in the conflict, if you have Syria and Iran involved, and the US coming in, then we are in a situation where we are just looking at world stability. Now, various factors have occurred. First of all, Cold War was very easy to understand. You had Russia on the one hand, with the entire East European countries. And then we had the United States and its allies. Right? The people joining online, so they won't be able to hear without us, no? Yeah. So we today have a world which is considered multipolar, but then everybody thinks he's a pole. Every country thinks it's a pole. So there is confusion today. The energy sector, we know where it is going. The Russia-Ukraine conflict hit it. Now Hamas will again hit it. An increase in energy prices. It's not just fuel prices. Coal prices also went up a couple of years ago during the pandemic. And that's going to hit Okay, so what he was saying, what Shiv Shankar Menon was saying, that the entire global scenario has changed. Now, in this situation, the G20 was held, and a detailed summit declaration covering many areas that was adopted by the Delhi summit. And one of the objectives it is stated is better integrate the perspectives of developing countries, including LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDs into future G20 agenda and strengthen the voice of developing countries in global decision making. Further, as you know, the African Union has come into the G20 today, and this has considerably strengthened the voice of the global South in the direction in which G20 will move in the future. It also says today's era must not be one of war. I mean, G20 took place before Hamas launched its rockets. We therefore reiterate the need for well-calibrated monetary, fiscal, financial, and structural policies to promote growth, reduce inequalities, and maintain macroeconomic and financial stability. As you know, it's not only in respect of energy, it's not only in respect of shortages arising after the pandemic. It is also the fact that there are severe debt issues which have struck many developing countries. We recall the struggles that Sri Lanka had to go through. We recall also the problems that Pakistan has been facing and is currently facing. So debt restructuring again becomes a very critical part of how we are going to go forward in the world. There is, in this part of the G20, there is a Jaipur call for action for strengthening MSMEs, which again is related to innovation, because the more innovation that takes place, the more integration that takes place between all the countries of the world, the greater will be the role of MSMEs, the medium and small and micro enterprises in the development process. The other thing that has happened is, I mean, you're all economists or social activists in various ways. The other thing that has happened is that economics is no longer primary. Politics has trumped economics. It is geopolitics that is today determining the course of economics. And economic action is being taken to strengthen geopolitical interests. The financial order has been disturbed after the expropriation of Russian reserves and the expulsion of Russia from SWIFT. The dollar domination with which we are used to is now under threat. The multilateral trading system is existent only in name, the World Trade Organization. Instead, you have large regional trading blocks. And it is my sincere hope that someday or the other, we will have a South Asian trading bloc, because I think that's very important in striking a balance with the rest of the world. The non-proliferation regime that has virtually come to an end. And if you look at it from Iran all the way to China, most of the countries, many of the countries have nuclear weapons. And this is a highly volatile area. Any small problem can trigger off a nuclear kind of warfare. This is a very, very important threat that we are facing. So it is in this context that we are talking of innovation. A very unstable world, a world where the order is not clear, the hierarchy is not clear, where the stability that we were used to in the, at least in the first 10 years of this millennium, that stability has disappeared, except for the 2008-9 crisis. It has been more or less a stable period. Now that stability has gone and there is a lot of confusion and disorder. So it is in this situation that you are looking at innovation. And we can see that the G20 is probably a good organization which can promote this, because it is not purely political. On the other hand, I think one of the advantages, one of the gains of the Indian presidency has that we moved with towards development, towards economic progress. We talked about, we had a G20 Chief Science Advisors Roundtable, Research and Innovation Initiative Gathering, Science 20. We looked at a meeting of agricultural chief scientists, space economy leaders meeting, energy, Science 20, and health and even traditional medicine. And we gave a lot of primacy in G20 to sustainable development, because the globe has to survive if we are to survive. And also on emerging technologies, there is a New Delhi Leaders Declaration that technology needs to grow fast for bridging the existing digital divides, and again, digital public infrastructure. Then at the same time, I do feel that all the G20 countries, as well as developing countries all over the world, have a great deal to share with each other. When I was in Geneva as ambassador of the World Trade Organization, one thing that kept striking me all the time was India has appropriate technology which can be used by the least developed, by the poorest countries in Africa. The kind of technology that is available to them from the West is expensive technology. While we have developed with our own system of Jugaad, which you have referred to in your book, that is, we develop things. I mean, I recall when I was industry secretary here in Kerala, one big problem that we were facing was, coir. Coir is the fiber of coconut, and perhaps it's grown in most of the countries represented here. Now, the way in which coir was spun into ropes that involved two women. Sorry. Hello, I'm in a meeting. I'm in a meeting now. I'll call you later. I think I better switch it off because this is going to come again. So, what was I saying? I was talking about Africa, where we can really, our technology can move. Coir. Oh, I was talking about coir. Okay. What I was saying is that these two ladies had to walk 24 kilometers per day from one end to the other end, back, again, back, in order to make a coir rope. So this was a thing that we really thought some change should be there. So somehow it struck me that we will announce an award for anybody who is able to develop a technology. And a simple cycle shop somewhere in the backyard of some decrepit building, they developed a machine which got the first prize. So we have the ability within us to innovate. We have the ability to exchange that information. But exchanging the information again requires a multilateral understanding. Because if we are being hamstrung by intellectual property rules, that kind of exchange is not going to take place that easily. So these are all aspects, I think, which Globelics can look at. What kind of changes do you need in this world? And how can Globelics become an effective forum for ventilating those opinions and getting the world to agree? How can you reach across to the global leaders? These are the issues, I think, which you must really consider. And I hope that your meeting will be a great success. And I expect that my colleagues, my panelists, will have many interesting things to say. I know some of them, they're extremely capable people. I've worked with at least Mr. Nagesh Kumar, who has been, who helped me a lot when I was the ambassador in Geneva. So I'm sure that you'll get a great deal of information during this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for setting the tone for the deliberation, this important plenary. May I invite Professor Nagesh Kumar.
Thank you, the chair, Mr. K.M. Chandrasekhar. I really had the privilege to work with him when he served as ambassador of India to WTO, and some very fascinating issues of development in the context of Cancun ministerial. And we had a lot of interesting time working together and learned a lot from working with him. So very nice to reconnect with him after a long time. And I want to begin also by thanking KJ for putting all the old friends together at one place. And at this 20th anniversary conference of Globelics, very soon after India hosted the summit, the big, fabulous summit of the G20 leaders in Delhi last month. And, and I want to begin by congratulating this community of scholars in Globelics at their 20th anniversary. And I hope the co-chair, Professor Luke Sute, is on board. And I was actually hoping to see him here, but he is only online. I also had the opportunity to work very closely with Luke and his colleagues when I served as a member of faculty of UNU INTAC, which later became UNU Merit, merging Merit and INTAC in the same city, which was very sensible thing. And used to join Luke, who was at that time at Merit, regularly, along with some of my colleagues from UNU INTAC, practically every day over lunch. So, so very nice to see all of you here, and this discussion, of which the context has been set by Mr. Chandrasekhar very eminently, with his deep insights into what is going on in the world in geopolitics and in economics. And I think the theme of this session on knowledge-driven transformations in the global south, in the context of G20 and India presidency, I just wanted to share some thoughts on that, and where do we go? I leave you with where do we go from here? I mean, what has been achieved at this G20 summit in India's presidency, and what is to be done in the coming 2 or 3 years, because it's a process. It's not an one-off kind of thing, and it's a process. So let me just begin. I think this, I feel, since last year, 2022 onwards, the next couple of years are G20's developing country moment or development moment, because we had last presidency held by Indonesian, president, then India, then coming Brazil and South Africa. So IBSA, IIBSA, and India particularly. I mean, some work had been started in Indonesia, but India took it really full board and took it very far in bringing development agenda at the center of G20 in many ways, and Mr. Chandrasekhar alluded to that. So it began with the Voices of Global South Summit in February last year. This year, February this year, with 125 countries joining, and PM himself led that, to hear the perspectives of what developing countries are feeling, which are not on the table at the G20, because only 20 countries, including new African Union, are there. So gathering the perspectives and bringing them to the main table was one thing which he tried to do, and then bringing African Union as a full member, which I think, I feel that it is a very lasting legacy of Indian presidency to enhance the inclusivity of this G20 process. Some years ago, I was, when I was working in Bangkok as a chief economist of UN SCAP, I was approached by the South Korean presidency of G20, actually the South Korean Sherpa, to host a meeting of our members, UN SCAP's members, which are not part of G20, and get their perspectives fed into the process. So I hosted a meeting, a consultative meeting, as we call, of UN SCAP's members, which are 62 members, and in Bangkok, 2 days, we heard them. And some of the refrain which was coming from them was that this is a self-appointed group of 20 countries, and we are not part of. So they really felt excluded. So it is very important that we hear the countries which are not on the table. And that job, I mean, was done very well by India, hearing them out and taking those perspectives to the table as a president or leader of the grouping. And if you look at the Delhi Declaration, which, by the way, was not expected to be signed, and it did. So that by itself was a very big achievement. If you look at that declaration, development, and as Mr. Chandrasekhar said, is, very much central to the whole declaration of G20, which was adopted in Delhi. And so many things like primacy of strong, sustainable, balanced, and inclusive growth. Mind the adjectives to growth. Economic growth is central for development, but it needs to be inclusive, it needs to be balanced, it needs to be strong, and it needs to be sustainable. So that is the first, para or sort of the declaration. Then recommitting to SDGs. These SDGs adopted in 2015, and we have finished half of their duration to 2030 target. Not much has been achieved, and actually we have regressed in these 3 years of COVID lockdown in many ways. So 130 million people may have been pushed back into poverty again. and so many migrant workers lost their jobs. And so we have all witnessed what devastation in economic and social terms it has brought about. So recommitting to SDGs and to make the most of the coming 7 years or the half of the time left, accelerate the progress and get them was also very important. And then the Green Development Pact for Sustainable Future. That is the next set of issues covered in the this summit declaration. And there it had some of the ideas which can be having a far-reaching impact, including the mainstreaming of lifestyle for environment. So everyone changes their lifestyles so that we have lesser carbon footprints. And the circular economy, mainstreaming circular economy, a clean energy transition. And for that, lot of new initiatives were sort of started or launched, including Resource Efficiency and Circular Economy Industry Coalition, which was an Indian idea. The Green Hydrogen Innovation Center set up by International Solar Alliance, which is also an India and French initiative, International Solar Alliance, as you know. The Global Biofuel Alliance, which was also started and announced at the G20 summit. And then climate finance, because all of this Green Development Pact would remain a talk shop unless there is a money to steamroll it and achieve it. And there were numbers which were computed by different agencies and economists, which mean that $4 trillion per year are needed to really get this climate agenda addressed. So for that, reform of multilateral development banks, and reform multilateralism, Mr. Chandrasekhar was referring to that. So there real progress is happening. There was a group set up by Prime Minister of India as a president of G20, co-chaired by Professor Larry Summers, former chairman of Presidential Economic Advisory Council in US, and Mr. N.K. Singh. So they are chairing a group, and they have already submitted first report, which was taken note of by the summit. And the second report is due in this month. So the idea is that recapitalize the multilateral development banks, enhance their lending capacity so that they can provide affordable finance to low-income and middle-income countries, because private finance, the terms are so onerous. Today, 125 countries are reeling under the debt crisis. Why? Because they kept on borrowing from private lenders and capital markets. And then now suddenly the debt burden, the repayment burden has grown so much that they have to borrow to pay back the old commitments. So enhancing the lending capacity of multilateral development banks is an important solution. And on that, real concrete progress is coming. So on the technology transformation and digital public infrastructure, which relates to the theme of this session and this conference, there, I think a lot of progress was made, but a lot more needs to be done. So that is what I am going to spend next few minutes about. We heard yesterday Professor Lundwall talking about how asymmetric or imbalanced the technology scene remains. Till date, 95% of all technology payments are received by developed countries. So this is the same situation which prevailed 40 years ago or 50 years ago, that it was highly concentrated in a handful of countries, just top 6 countries, which are all members of OECD. What a change in last 30, 40 years is that China has become a little bit more important producer of technology, and before that, Republic of Korea. But other than that, the pattern is virtually the same. So the same set of half a dozen countries continue to dominate the technology scene, and 95% of all royalties, technical fees, licensing fees paid by anybody go to them. And this is not changing. So, and what is worse is that earlier there were some, some knowledge was being produced in public domain and was being put in public domain. India became a country with a successful green revolution, and Dr. Swaminathan, father of India's green revolution, we have just lost him last week. He, was able to use the knowledge available in public domain put together by what was called as CGIAR, Consultative Group on International Agriculture Research, of which CIMMIT, IRI are the members, ICRISAT in India. So they had developed some technology and knowledge which was built upon by India's agriculture research system, and we became self-sufficient in cereals. We were actually very severely deficit country in cereals, and we were having a famine kind of situation in 1960s. Not anymore. So we were able to draw upon the knowledge which was in public domain. But now, what is the knowledge in public domain? Hardly any. So everything is becoming private, and much more than that, this new revolution, new technology revolution, which has been referred to, IR 4.0 or Industry 4.0, it is entirely done by a clutch of technology companies. The 5 top tech, big tech, they are called, FANGs, sometimes they are called. In last 1 year, if you're reading Economist, you see that in last 1 year, they have added $2.25 trillion to their market capitalization. Just 5 companies in 1 year adding $2.25 trillion to their market capitalization. So the technology and concentration at the top has actually accentuated with the new digital revolution. And that means much more of inequalities between countries and within countries, depending upon who has the technology and who doesn't. So this gap is widening rather than narrowing. So technology, I think, was very important issue to be raised at the summit, and it was. And so while there is a huge concentration at the top end, there are some applications being developed by countries like India, which had, some capacity. India developed some capacity in ICT software, and India began to use it for its own inclusive development. So India, for instance, started this unique identification program, the biometric identity, which practically every Indian has. That led to a lot of other innovations of inclusive nature. So, for instance, we have these digital payments. Anybody can pay from mobile phones, and that became a huge success. Then we went to public procurement through digital means. So there are so many such innovations which can be used for inclusive development. So India put that information, that knowledge, that development experience of the last decade at disposal of all developing countries. So number of initiatives were announced at the summit, which include G20 framework for systems of digital public infrastructure for development, deployment, and governance of DPI, the digital public infrastructure. then India announced a plan to build a global digital platform for and repository for DPI, and then one future alliance to build capacity, technical assistance for and funding support for use of digital public infrastructure by low and middle income countries, which was India's kind of, putting its own development experience to, for use by any developing country, and willingness to help them build their capacity. However, the access to climate technologies, the other part of, and this is where I am going to end, so on that, very little, because that technology is held by the top tier technology generators, which earlier I was referring to and everybody talks about. Yesterday, Professor Lundwall was talking about. So, for instance, clean transition is talked about. It is a very important, critical thing for the world to switch over to clean energy, to bring down the carbon footprints. But you also know that developing countries can do it only gradually. They don't have resources and technology to move to clean fuels and clean sources of energy overnight. How do they do? So they will have to bring down it gradually, and in the interim, if they could be helped with some of the clean coal technologies, carbon capture, storage and use technologies, and so new technologies which are coming up, if they can be provided that on an affordable basis, they could bring down the emissions and help this idea of net zero transition. But there is no such statement about all of this will be provided. So the countries which own all of these technologies need to come forward. And there is a precedence in the form of TRIPS and public health, which was adopted in 2003 when Mr. Chandrasekhar was in Geneva, India's permanent representative and ambassador to WTO. So the patents and monopolies on vital drugs were, sort of put on you could take a compulsory license against them. And that has been very helpful for bringing down this menace of AIDS in Africa, for instance. And so there are precedents. So why not that precedence is built upon for climate technologies? This is something which needs to be worked upon in the coming G20 summits. There is another thing which could be done, and and that is Article 66.2 of TRIPS agreement, which provides for transfer of technology, but it was never spelled out fully. It is left as a best endeavor clause. I think the time has come to give meaning to that for transfer of climate technologies, what can be done and should be done. So that should be spelled out. Then differential rates of technology fees and royalties, which developing countries pay and developed countries pay, could be also, discussed. And so I think this is the climate technology agenda, which is work in progress, which should be hopefully built upon in the coming presidencies of other emerging and developing or members of the Global South, that is Brazil and South Africa. So it is my hope that India's presidency has delivered a lot, but we need to carry that momentum forward, the development-oriented momentum in G20 process forward. And WTO, as Mr. Chandrasekhar said rightly, is into really a non-functional kind of a shape. So G20 is where the action is. And I hope with the leadership of the emerging countries in the next few years, this sort of pattern, a new pattern of focusing on development agenda by India will be continued and built upon. On that note, I stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Nagesh Kumar, for that excellent exposition by providing such a broader landscape and at the same time highlighting the relevance of and role of India in building learning, innovation, and competence building systems in the South. I fondly recall my years of association within the early part of 2000. And I learned a lot. I take this occasion to thank you and acknowledge you for that. May I now invite Professor Kunli. And I think it will be much appreciated if the speakers can confine to 10 minutes. Even then we'll be late by 10 to 15 minutes. I'm sorry. I know that you have a lot to speak. You have a lot of experience. I'm sorry about it.
Thank you, Chairman and Coordinator KJ Joseph, for inviting me to this important panel. I'm Kunli from South Korea. Okay. I understand that the keyword for our session today is about knowledge, G20, and probably India and Global South. So now our chairman added the context of geopolitics or globalization. So let me start from that context. We all know that the paradigm of globalization has been dominant for several decades, but now it's going to be kind of ended, right? So we are now facing new era called deglobalization. It's a very important change in context. And if globalization is gone, what is coming up? What is arriving? And it is state or government. The state has replaced globalization as a new key players. And this is a very important factor affecting all the economic growth, innovation in the global South. Okay. In other words, that means specifically industrial policy is back. Once tabbed in mainstream economics, now it's every country trying, including US, trying various kind of industrial or innovation policies. And we are now more free to do so because we used to complain lack of police space in WTO regime, but now WTO stopped working. It's more functioning. So you don't have to worry about WTO. You are free to do whatever you can do in terms of innovation, industrial policy, and more role intervention or stimulus package by government. Okay. Then now, what we should do? What's the focus of new industrial policy? It should be knowledges. We should build more knowledge bases in each country, and that means. Global South, we used to rely on foreign knowledge to build up our product and so on. But now we should increase more local creation, deepening knowledges, reducing reliance on foreign knowledges. We can measure it by one indicator called knowledge localization, which is about how many your citation in patent in your same country. It's kind of national level self-citations, okay? In advanced country, this ratio is very high. But emerging country, very low, but Korea all caught up in terms of reaching the level of global north, which is about 15% or 10%. How about India? India very low still. That means it has to catch up in terms of increasing more local creation and diffusion of knowledges, okay? And in today's morning session, another indicator is that who are filing patent in your country. In other words, residents or Indian versus non-resident or foreigners. And usually South patent application each country dominated by foreign inventors, foreign countries. This should be changed. In the past, in East Asia, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and China, all like that, foreign dominance. But we reverse situation, where now majority are filed by residents. And this morning I saw a presentation by Indian scholars. India is catching up. It's a very promising sign. So we should increase more local knowledge and local knowledge bases. That's so important indicator of your getting strong in knowledge. Without that, will still remain dependent on foreign knowledge. Okay. And my last point is about again global issues. I like to contrast the foreign aid versus market access. In other words, usually North gives aid to South, and South also needs access to Northern market. Maybe both important, but I'd like to emphasize the market access. Let me give an example. I recently doing research on coffee value chain in global market. Coffee is everybody is consuming. Okay, I see there are big asymmetry in coffee value chain. Okay, if you list who are the producing coffee, unprocessed coffee, it's all South. If you count top 7 or 8 coffee producers, it's all South. Almost 80%, 90% market share. But they are producing, exporting only unprocessed coffee. If you turn to the other processed, branded coffee, almost 90%, 95% dominated by country form in the North. Big asymmetry. That's why Global South is not making much money, even if we produce coffee. We should change this situation. And to do that, we don't need a foreign aid, we need just market access. Why I'm saying that? Because when South country try to export processed coffee, what do they face? They face 2 constraints. First, technical barriers, non-tariff barrier. The other is tariff. Okay, you should innovation, knowledge to make your coffee more clean, satisfying the test condition, sanitary condition. Also, tariff. I'm surprised found that northern country charge 0 tariff from southern countries unprocessed coffee, 0 tariff. But guess how many tariff against processed coffee? It's 10 to 20%. Amazing situation. That's why we cannot export processed coffee to northern market. Not its only reason, but one of the reasons. This should be changed. This should be global agenda, like a G20 context and so on. Okay. So I'd like to emphasize that the market access is a real problem when you're trying to catching up. It's not just a matter of foreign aid. We need access rather than foreign aid. That's what I'm saying. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kinley, for such a succinct but powerful articulation of the need of the South, and looking forward to the need for, to use your own term, the new windows of opportunity for us. Thank you very much. And may I invite Professor Rishikesh T. Krishnan?
Yes, so I'll just try and build on some of the comments made by the earlier speakers. If you look at some of the issues that India emphasized in this year's G20 summit, many of them arose from our experience in innovation in a couple of specific domains. So I'd just like to dwell on these for a couple of minutes. Professor Nagesh Kumar spoke about the importance of digital public infrastructure, particularly in terms of its ability to combat monopolies, as also provide a more level playing field for local players. There's some interesting models behind this digital public infrastructure, at least in the Indian context, which perhaps should attract more attention from our Globelics scholars. Though this is digital public infrastructure, interestingly, much of it has been created in a quasi-public kind of setting. While India traditionally had a lot of its R&D focused in the government sector, and I spoke about this briefly yesterday, about how a lot of this was done in government research labs. Interestingly, the digital public infrastructure created in India has not emanated from any of these labs, or at least not in the form in which it is being used today. A lot of it has emerged from people who work in the software and IT industry, which is a capability that India built over many years. And one of the things we keep debating in India is why this did not translate into more product innovation. But it's now translated into product innovation, but in a different setting, which is in the digital public infrastructure context. So Professor Nagesh Kumar spoke about Aadhaar, which was the unique identification, which was a project started more than a decade ago, which was the first time this model was tried out. where the core development of the UID system actually happened neither through the private sector in the form of commercial enterprises, nor through the public sector in the form of government research labs or institutions, but through largely voluntary effort, originally outside the government umbrella, but then slowly brought into the government umbrella when it had to be scaled in a much larger way. Similar things have happened with the digital payment system that Nagesh spoke about, where the initial development again happened largely through the talent from the software sector, but working informally as a sort of collaborative effort. So what I'm trying to just present to you is that there are new models. These don't follow, I mean, it's not quite open source. It's not quite public R&D in the sense that we know it. It's certainly not private R&D because it's finally taking the shape of digital public infrastructure. But is these new models which is enabling the mobilization of the locally available talent, which was developed through other programs to solve problems which are relevant to the local context. And I think one of the key things of this digital public infrastructure is it allows interoperability. It provides a platform for various other startups and other entities to hook into this broad platform. It is completely agnostic to which bank or which payment provider you're talking about. And this takes me to the second point. Another issue which India emphasized in G20 was the importance of startups. While the startups, of course, have been an important part of the innovation landscape across the world, these were not part of the formal discussion in the G20 setup. But this time in the G20 discussion, there was a separate track on startups, which finally got reflected, I think, somewhere in the final declaration as well. And this is, I think, again, an important shift in the way we have been looking at innovation in India, as I explained yesterday, where increasingly we are beginning to see the importance and relevance of startups in driving the innovation agenda, and particularly their ability to solve more contextual problems at the local level, which will help address a lot of the local challenges we face in a way which is quite different from the way maybe existing solutions from elsewhere would do it. In that context, I would just mention to Professor Kyun Lee, I'm not sure that your patent data will capture any of these things because none of these actually fall in the patent domain. Digital public infrastructure is not really in the patent domain. A lot of startups in India who are solving problems are not necessarily trying to protect all of that very rigorously with the IP. So if you were to study this a few years later, you may not quite see it there in the IP data, though there's a lot of interesting stuff happening on the ground. Anyway, you don't, but I'm just saying there are indirect ways. Yeah, but the indirect ways you could try to patent. So Sushil, it's true that you don't have patents, but the indirect ways you could do copyright, you could try and embed it in a chip. There are many ways in which you could try to do it, but even that's not happening in such a big way. That's the only limited point I'm trying to make. And the final point I would like to make is on the subject of vaccines, which again is something which came out of COVID. And once again, there, I think we've seen that a lot of the traditional methods we try to do things, which have worked in limited ways, have now sort of translated into alternate models. So if you look at the India's COVID vaccine, the one which actually got commercialized, which is Covaxin, again, it came out of a collaboration between the National Institute of Virology and a private biotech firm, Bharat Biotech. But what is more interesting to ask is how did Bharat Biotech develop the capability to commercialize vaccines? And that came from an earlier program where they were working very closely with the All India Institute of Medical Sciences to produce a vaccine against rotavirus over the last decade or so. So we're again seeing the importance of some of the traditional models, but those now morphing into slightly different kind of models now focused on startups and other innovative enterprises. And I think this is again an area which we should look at going forward in Globelics. So just in summary, I think India's G20 contribution has largely been, as was mentioned, based on our experience, but I think it's trying to also translate some of these models which seem to have worked in India somewhat by accident, I would say. I don't think it was quite by design, but there are broader, I think, lessons which we perhaps need to learn, and maybe this is something the community of scholars should look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Rishikesh Krishna, in articulating innovations in India's innovation process. And I think we need to learn more about it. And it's very important that we declare ourselves that we do not know. And that knowledge is perhaps the most important knowledge. Thank you very much for highlighting that. And I think, may I invite Professor Mamo Mushi, and he's one of the founding members of Globelics. And I think that's enough, isn't it, Professor?
Yeah, it's
Mamo?
too much. Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate. When the G20 was taking place, the South African television and radios were always asking me questions. And when my brother KJ asked me to talk, I said I will do. But let me be critical. Allow me to be critical. We have the G20. The one important, very beautiful principle that we saw is that the ancient, in the Sanskrit, in the ancient, you have this Vasudhaiva Kutubakam. They don't treat humans as strangers. Treat them as one human family. You know, India is almost, if you believe in this and if you work on it and really practice it, you are not a country. You are not a nation. You could be a civilization, honestly. And now on the G20, that was my brother told me, Mamo, what you're talking, they are now doing it. He said to me, Lakwinder Singh, Professor Lakwinder Singh. What I'm saying to you is that if this is a principle, let me just say this to you. We have the United Nations. All countries that are members of the United Nations declare peace, security, all right, development, all the good things. But what do they practice? The countries that are members of the United Nations go to war. How many wars? From 1985 until now, the United States has invaded 15 countries. It's a lot. So why are you members of the United Nations and you declare, but you practice, you implement something else? Why do we have a military industrial complex when we should have a humanity life savior complex? No, sincerely. Now we have the United Nations, we have G7, we have G20, we have BRICS. I don't know. We have the African Union, we have the European Union, we have the ASEAN, we have all these regions. Do we need all these things? To be honest with you, my feeling is that if the virus in our brain, the SIM card, is full of virus, hate, conflict, profit-making, self-interest, if we're driven by values like that, we will never be, whatever we create will never save us. We have to change our mindset, the SIM card, all right? The software, the hard disk of our brain, the organoid intelligence we need, not artificial intelligence, organoid intelligence. Our brain must be changed. We really need to, or even use technology, innovation, Globelics. I really want us to really advance, re-innovate innovation also, rethink, unthink, to rethink, unlearn, to relearn in a new way. All these principles we do. Organizing, creating, making members. Just give you another example. The African Union. African Union, we have 55 states, 54 and 55, if you include the Sahara, Western Sahara, if it becomes 55. What do we have? Whenever we are, like when the Ukraine thing happened, the decision making, remember when the Security Council, they don't unite, African Union doesn't decide. African countries divide. So I'm just wondering, if they join in the G20, are they going to, are all these countries going to behave as united? I'm not sure. So because of this challenge I have, I'm just saying that we need to create a new approach, a new way by which we can actually rethink how countries must relate with each other. The relationship, if they say peaceful relationship, they must do it, not talk it. How do we do that? is the most important thing. And I hope the G20, my challenge to you in India is use your great value and philosophy, and that's what you should do. I also come from a country called Ethiopia, and India used to be called Eastern Ethiopia in the ancient time. And I can send it to you. It used to be called like that. And I must tell you, the greatest philosopher, his name is Zara Yaakov. You know, Claude Sumner is a Canadian professor. He went to teach philosophy in Addis Ababa University. He came and he translated the book, Hatata. It's written in the ancient Ethiopian language. I must tell you what he said. God is not religion. Do not define God with religion. Look what has happened even with religion. Why are we people who say we trust God through religion and then we fight each other? We go to war. This is wrong. So he said it like that. He also said, who is happy? The poor or the rich? He said the poor, when they give them something, they are very happy. They immediately become happy. The rich, they have more, they want more. Because they want more, when they don't get it, they are always miserable. So, no, all I'm saying, and then he created what's called the African Enlightenment, long before the European, before Hegel, Kant, all of these philosophers. All I'm simply saying to you is that I really think we need to rethink ourselves very much. And we're thinking, just for you to practically, we have now created what's called the International Internship International University, where we have very good, I'm so happy with them. Indian philosophers, professors and so on are helping us, as well as we are in Africa. We're creating what we call the India-Africa Bridge. We're also creating the Africa-China Bridge. I'm a counselor there also, and we're working with many universities. They are just wonderful. In fact, they just appointed me. Now I'm here. They made me associate professor in one of the universities. I'm just so happy. They want us to work together. We want to link, and we want to do it with these values. We also created what we call Osiris University. We want the indigenous rich knowledge that was created. You will not believe also what India's indigenous knowledge is extraordinary. There was a professor, a doctor called Dr. Ruti. She gave a lecture once when we did. I was so impressed. Everything you see about climate change, all these things, the way in the ancient time they were doing it is incredible. He had so many knowledge. We don't know it. We don't educate it. Even in this, I don't know whether you do it in use, but we don't do it. We are now thinking of creating a whole forum. We even created what we called an Africa Renaissance Forum. We're now working on creating indigenous curriculums to make sure that we really re-educate people to really, with moral intelligence, intellectual intelligence, all right, emotional intelligence, with honesty, sincerity, humility, integrity, with love to all of you as one family. When I see you, I hug you all because I want to be nice to you. I don't want to hurt you at all. That's what we should be doing. I say to my students, be my teachers. If you are innovators, you become teachers, yes. I say to my brother Bhaskaran the same thing. You know, he's been helping me all my life. People like that, we just become very good. Love and friends. I don't know whether G20 will do that. My challenge to all of you is make it happen. Don't just create like the United Nations and create war. Don't create also conflict. Don't just try to solve, you know, the way it was started, it was a financial crisis that made it, no. And I think we should do it. Thank you very much. I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mamo. I was wondering what different thing you are going to speak today. And you made it. And interestingly, the world we are living in, there is a big difference between the preaching and practice. And that is to be highlighted. Thank you very much. Now, may I invite Professor Sujit Bhattacharya from the States.
Thank you, Professor Joseph, organizers, for giving me this opportunity. You know, when you have such eloquent speakers and who have already spoken on, when I was looking at the notes, scribbling of the notes which I have taken, and I saw that Professor Nagesh and Professor Krishnan had already spoken on many of these issues and much more powerful way. But in a sense, it re-stresses always to say that these are the issues that, and then Professor Mamumuchi's talk really takes me to the fundamental issues which he has raised. And it is true that the way we look at the G20 now, the good points of the G20, rightly so pointed out, that we have, in spite of what the problematics which you have said, that with so many different configurations emerging, but still it is a very positive outcome that we had now. Earlier it was G19 plus one, I would say, European Union, but now we have the African Union also. So it makes a sense of a stronger recognition of a South-South cooperation, which is there in a sense, in principle, and I do hope that it translates also into actions. Many of the things which were spoken on this, for this particular G20, I would say it was, this particular G20 was held within a particular backdrop, a very important backdrop of the fault lines which we have seen during this COVID-19, and which has actually exposed everyone to the vulnerabilities. And it has also shown that the much neglected, what we had used to call jugaad and all that, that there has a much more meaning to that. And the new recognitions of these types of innovation, I would say, and I will talk on that in a few moments on this. And it has also told us about, as this backdrop was also about the challenge of meeting the SDG goals. And as you say that we are, yesterday itself we were talking about it, and I would say that the earth is sick, because when we have a temperature of 100 degrees, we call ourselves sick. We are already sick. The whole earth is already at 2 degrees centigrade and it is moving up. So there is how we can rethink of innovation and all, so that we are, I don't think that the processes of not making it more sick. And we are seeing the vulnerabilities which is happening across because of that. Third, I would say is that negotiating the fourth industrial revolution, the new technologies. As you dive deep, you find that it is a different type of negotiation. It is not only fourth industrial revolution, we are moving into fifth industrial revolution. These are not only nomenclatures. You see that it is a human machine. All we are now becoming slowly things. We are billions of things which are connected, and human beings are also now connected as things. And as we move into 5G, we will be more things than human beings. So how we negotiate that? And when you look at these negotiations, you see the technologies which are coming, and the technologies which are coming have different type of barriers. There are when not only it is fourth industrial revolution, if you look at third onwards, you see that a new phenomena has come. It is not only patents and all, you also see various type of anticipatory standards are coming. Before the technology comes, the standards gets created, and you just can't move because there is a cartel within which the standards get created, and the new technologies come in that. So how to break that? So within this context of looking into all these issues, many of the issues had come up in this G20, and there were many tracks. The good point was that it was not only one major summit, there were many other tracks which had come, and it had discussed about startups, it had discussed about, but at the same time, there is always, when you talk of startups, you require also a differentiated startup ecosystem. Maybe these are another issues which one has to talk of. And then there were also issues, probably somewhere or the other, that the different, we had always talked of technology transfer. So in a sense, we have said that it is transfer and we are giving people as a beneficiary. So this new thinking of the follow-up innovation, which if you see closely, many of the countries, I would say South Korea and others, they would do the follow-up innovation because they have the absorptive capacity to do so. And it happened because of the schooling and the very good educational system which they had. So possibly on the fundamental levels, G20 had tried to touch it, but I think it has to go deeper to touch into these issues of how to create this, to not to talk of the capability failures, which you see and which we had all talked about. And as you see that, I will just say 1 or 2 points before I close. You see that when you talk of this digitalization, it is true, it is a very, there are very good learnings from that, the way we have built the framework. I was very intrigued and if you see that how difficult it is enter this space. India tried to create a standard which could actually enhance the signal reach to the rural people, and the 3GPP, which holds the standards for 5G. It was so difficult negotiation, and finally it was adopted. So these type of things which comes when the standards are developed, and what it is in an open platform, which actually also unsettles them. And what it does is that many of these countries in South countries and all, they can have now this standard by which they can enhance the signal and reach to a much larger population. So these are the things which I think very agenda-based challenges should be taken up while one looks into these different forums. Finally, I would end up by saying that the importance of building up link, not only frugal innovation, we would say, but it is also important to develop the business strategies and the models within that by making it really successful. I was listening to Govind Rajan, and it was very interesting about, he was talking about the linkages. And then I dived deep to found out that, see, like the open heart, we have this what you call, sorry, we have this Devi Shetty's Narayan Hridayalaya. What it does is that it has a mass, it is sort of a mass production system for open heart surgery, and it has made open heart surgery and so highly efficient. It takes only $2,000 to do an open heart surgery there. And if you look at it, it is 75 times cheaper than what is done in USA. And 55% of them are done free there. But in spite of that, it is a profitable business model. So again, when you look at MNC who works here, GE, and he has created a ECG machine, portable ECG machine, and which is $100 cost. And what it does is that it can make 700 scans for the ECG, portable ECG. And from here, they have been able to put it across the different countries. And even in USA and all, for emergency medical care in the ambulances, you can see these type of ECG machines. So what I'm trying to hint at is that these are the issues, many of these issues which were raised, many of these things which has come across with India's presidency, and it has actually opened up the window for South economies also to demonstrate the different models which can be workable and which can make a, what you call, a greater impact. And with that, I end. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Sujit Bhattacharya, for highlighting the hidden and otherwise hurdles, as well as the new capabilities that are available in the South
which could be mutually shared. Thank you very much. Now, Priyadarshi Das, Dr. Priyadarshi Das is going to reflect on the issue. And you know that RIS has been very closely associated with the whole process. Over to you, Priyadarshi.
Thank you, sir. My fellow panelists have already covered a very comprehensive coverage of G20 Indian presidency and G20 in general. I have a couple of slides. I will not repeat what has been said, but if there is a shift in emphasis, I'll just highlight that. In the beginning, Chair mentioned there is a ongoing crisis of multilateralism happening. And that perhaps gives us a scope that who will do and who will fill this vacuum. Shall we leave the nation states to decide their own fortune, or we still have some, say, means to bridge this vacuum in the international process? So in that line, what do we expect from G20? Can you change that here? You can change it here. Please change it. Please change there. Only few slides are there. I'll ask you to change it. Please change it. Next slide, please. So what do we expect from G20? If we believe that G20 works for the world, so can it provide solutions to the global challenges? And can it strengthen multilateralism as we face multiple crises of food, energy, debt, and all these? And does it provide enough of ideas and perspectives to preserve the nature, the environment, and still not compromise with the goal of achieving high economic growth and development? And this has been said by my fellow panelists. What are the critical enablers to do that? Technology, of course, we need. But what technology we are talking of today is not the same that we talk of 70s. We are not talking about digital technologies. We are not talking about making technologies accessible at affordable prices, not a technology regime which creates dependence forever by paying higher royalties and license fees. We need finance, but we are not talking just about World Bank, ADB funding projects in the countries. We are talking about innovative financing mechanisms, blended finance, unlocking private capital, involving institutional investors in the process. So that innovation becomes the key here. Third, can we shift the way we have been consuming and producing the goods? So there is a change in the way production should happen, and the same way responsible consumption would happen if we want to make it consistent with the climate goals and make it energy efficient. Then circular economy models where we are saying there is no waste absolutely in the way we work. Everything can be converted into some means of wealth. So there is no waste in the process, and just energy transitions. So you can't abruptly change the energy consumption or production. You have to go gradualistic path, and these are necessary. So can we say digital technology is a new technology regime? Whether we say it or not, it has become like that. Digitalization is a pervasive force that we see in whatever we do in our economic or in our daily life. So we need to harness the digital economy. How do we do that? So G20 has come up with a couple of documents and the principles and the toolkits. Those were there before in the Japanese presidency and others, but Indian presidency sort of tried to emphasize it one step further by highlighting the role of digital public infrastructure, sharing its own experience in the digital finance field. A digital finance field, digital financial inclusion, whether you like it or not, financial innovations are going to happen. It will create a problem for you. It would lead to financial crisis, but we need to prepare for that sort of situation. The regulations for crypto assets, we are talking in literature But for the first time, India has made its attempt to convince the G20 leaders and the rest of the world that we need a framework which is common, which is acceptable to all, at least preparing towards that. And then central bank digital currency. We are talking about, we go an incremental way of doing it, but you can't say no, you have to do it. What we are doing, investing our time, research, everything to understand if we migrate from a paper currency to a digital currency, what type of risks we are inviting, how we build the regulatory system so that we prevent and minimize the risks. And the most important thing that Indian presidency has brought after Japanese presidency in 2019, that data could be utilized for development. Data is an engine for development. So that way, the principles for harnessing data and data capacity building initiatives have been undertaken. I would say that these are significant steps by Indian presidency. Just spend 2 minutes here. I brought this quote from the declaration itself, New Delhi Declaration. What they have said, that we recognize safe, secure, trusted, accountable, and inclusive digital public infrastructure. See, all these, each of these words have a meaning. Respectful of human rights, personal data, privacy, and intellectual property rights to foster resilience and enable service delivery and innovation. All of us are going to discuss in these 3 days of Globelics conference, all of these things. When you create technology, will you make it accessible to people? You are talking about all these things, but don't forget human rights. Don't forget that it could also create haves and have-nots in terms of the access to IP. So digital public infrastructure is operating on open source software. It's a shared platform. We have seen that this provides affordable solutions, but then that should not also create a system of digital divide, which is structurally, inherently unfavorable to least developed countries, those who have not enough of money to invest in such kind of things. So a couple of measures have been taken, which Professor Nagesh Kumar mentioned, but what particular mention here, one future alliance where capacity building technical assistance is emphasized, and this repository of that thing, which the G20 countries are expected to voluntarily share, perhaps provide solutions for that. Now, Professor Nagesh Kumar mentioned about financing, but what is the change that Indian presidency has brought? It has brought 2 things very sharply. Dealing with the legacy issues of ensuring macroeconomic coordination, coherence, and all these financial stability, but also appreciating the emerging challenges. As I said, cryptocurrencies, digital financial assets. I mean, you talk about DeFi, fintech, and all these, whether you like it or not, these are going to be the new asset categories. It will be you will be flooded with information. You have to think about it. The regulators are concerned about that. So how these things should evolve? So Indian presidency sort of raised that debate to the next level in a consolidated fashion, that we need regulation. We badly need regulation, which is a global set of rules. And sustainable finance also Professor Nagesh Kumar mentioned. But the only thing here is that Sustainable Finance Working Group is a new group which was created which was converted into a working group by Italian presidency. Earlier it was there in the Chinese presidency. Global debt vulnerability, chairman also mentioned at the beginning. The next slide is on that, and then I will end. Here, during Saudi's presidency, we had come up with this debt service suspension initiative. 73 low-income countries were eligible, but not all of them accessed. Why? Because it was only official creditors which are part of that. Private creditors were not part of that. What Indian presidency has done, that the common framework which was DSSI beyond, which IMF is implementing. So Indian presidency has facilitated the bilateral negotiation between the official creditors and the debt affected economies in the form of creating official creditor committees, which will be followed later on. So that is a step beyond what we have done during Saudi's presidency and Italian presidency. Also leveraging on the community that have got gathered during the global sovereign debt roundtable. So leveraging on that network to convince and come up with debt restructuring mechanisms. Data transparency is quite important. That is people, academic literature also highlights that not all different kinds of data are reported. Perhaps there is a reporting format gap which needs to be done. And all these standard initiatives by OECD, these are necessary steps towards that. What Indian presidency has done, this has been mentioned, African Union. I respect the observation by Professor Mamumosi. So the thing is that if we believe in G20 doing something, then it is only in terms of creating, in principle, agreeing to certain things that, yes, this is a problem, we need to work collectively. And if that document becomes a reference document for others. And inclusion here could be defined in 2-3 ways. African Union is a full member of G20. It is up to the African Union to reflect African issues in the G20 deliberations. But Indian presidency advocating the inclusion of African Union itself is a milestone, because at least you have made them to sit with the full other members to speak, which was not possible before as an observer state. Greater participation of women, women-led development, youth, MSME, these are also various facets of inclusion that Indian presidency has mentioned, highlighted. MSME integration with GVC, digitalization, all these are there. Most importantly, Indian presidency was not just an exercise by the federal government. It was all a collective exercise of the state governments, the district administration, and all these, so involving the subnational governments at various levels. And there is a strive for sustainability, which every presidency has done and Indian presidency has done. These are some of the initiatives which have been mentioned. Most importantly, the behavioral change dimension, which lifestyle for sustainable development emphasizes, is something, a unique contribution by India, that you don't just have material targets, energy consumption, change in the production technique, but also a change in the way, in the mindset that we believe that the nature is the mother nature, we need to work for it. So that the behavioral change is the contribution in that direction. I think I ended with this, but just last one sentence with which I will end, that out of these 4 consecutive developing country presidencies, India being in the second has created a hope, perhaps G20 being a plurilateral forum, serving as a multilateral process or contributing towards that. And this 83 paragraphs and 112 commitments of the New Delhi Declaration has been held as a reference document on development by G20 in the next coming years. And we believe that if Globelics also does research on that and says that how innovative technologies, how innovation in financing and innovation in the process of G20 deliberations could lead to an agenda, strong, sustainable, inclusive development agenda of G20. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Priyadarshi, who articulated very well on a very comprehensive manner, all aspects. Particularly, we are very excited by hearing India building on to its own digital competence, articulating the potential for the South and all other matters. Thank you very much. Now, I think we are already late by 15, almost 12 minutes, but it will be injustice to the audience if we don't give them at least 5 minutes. I think the floor is open. A chair can be, okay. Well, if there are any pressing questions, 2 questions, perhaps from the left side and right side, if there is. Yeah, I think here is Professor Rainer Walls from Germany. Rainer, please, the mic is, just give the mic.
Thank you very much for the fascinating presentations and your views. Now, I have one question. On the one hand, you raised the issue of a new geopolitical landscape, perhaps new coalitions forming, much more bilateral in some instances. On the other hand, you emphasize very much the importance of international cooperation, of G20 and so on. How do you think, do you see that that perhaps this new geopolitical landscape, this new coalition forming on the bilateral level, that will also undermine perhaps very much the multilateral aspects, and what do you see perhaps as therefore also the role, if we talk about SDGs, about these global challenges, that you perhaps need a differentiation, that you say there is still some common interest where it is in the interest of all to participate, and perhaps some more national interests? And do you see perhaps a tendency to separate these two areas?
Thank you very much. I think yeah, there is Manuel over there. Manuel, I think Manuel, Mike, give the mic over there. Very brief question. Shorter question will be getting a prize from the organizers.
Manuel from Latin America. How are you seeing the cooperation with Latin America? There are some advances with high-tech scholarships, but at the same time, the Chinese cooperation is really strong in Latin America. So India is an emerging and a big player, but how are you seeing the cooperation with Latin America?
Let us hear some rightist perspective here. From the right side, right questions. Okay, please, yeah. Here there is Professor Harilal. After that, you, right.
I am seeking the chair's response to Professor Mamuchi's points. I would like to hear his response.
Okay, give the mic behind. Yeah. Could you please introduce yourself? Yeah, mic is on. Yeah. Please introduce yourself.
May Anderson from Denmark. You were referring to innovating lifestyles, which is quite a novel concept to put up at that high political level. At least I've never heard about it before. Are you seeing India and other global South countries as possibly taking the lead in innovating lifestyles, since you have the advantage of actually having a low consumption level per capita as compared to the global South? Here you have a comparative advantage. Well, can you turn that into modernizing lifestyles of the future?
Since we value questions more than the answers, one more question here, right side.
Just a small concern about our emphasis on data for development at the G20. I mean, what kind of database we have now? I mean, we don't have data for census, for the consumption expenditure survey, for labor, on MSMEs. So a country which doesn't have data for itself is advising the world to go for data for development. I'm a little worried about that.
Okay, last question from the younger side here. Yeah.
So through most of the talks, I found a common resentment with the Western North countries, where the wealth is concentrated, technology is concentrated, and finance is concentrated. We see, India taking lead in G20, bringing in other South countries of African Union, but we already have a very strong South Union in form of BRICS. But India is, not very supportive of bringing in new South countries into BRICS. How do we see this contradiction? Why do we need to bargain inside a forum where there are already North countries, but when we have a strong South country union in form of BRICS, why can't India support bringing in more nations into BRICS?
Yeah, I think each question is worth one day's seminar, in fact. So I would like each of those who ask the question to reflect on it and write papers on it. But at the same time, each of our esteemed speakers will spend 30 seconds each. Because food is more important.
Just one person has every
Okay, the consensus among the panelists is that I answer all the questions. Okay, so first question, if I recall, was about the present situation and the conflict situation that is there presently, and how are we going to unite? I think I don't have an answer. None of you has got an answer for that, because the amount of hatred and differences that is being generated in the world today is such that union of mind seems to be increasingly difficult. So how that is going to change and how we really are going to come forward. I mean, I'm hoping that sometime or the other we go back another 15, 20 years. We have had enough of this kind of a problem. We need to now develop on our own. And development is our first priority. If that mindset doesn't come, but is that mindset going to come before we destroy ourselves? That is not a question which any of us can answer. But we can all add our voices to that. That's all that we expect from you. Go there, write, speak, and make your point very clear in all your respective countries that we need to be working together, not against each other. We have forgotten most of the questions. Will you remind me? Latin America. Oh, Latin America. Latin America, I tell you, I am very fond of Latin America, because when I was in Delhi, as joint secretary, one of my responsibilities, mainly dealing with the World Trade Organization, but one of my responsibilities was also Latin America. And Latin America, I found we had absolutely no connection. We had about $1 billion or something trade with all of Latin America. So I called the CII, these are the Confederation of Indian Industries, Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, Punjab and Haryana Punjab, Haryana, Delhi Chamber, all of them, I called them. And I said, you send delegations out to Latin America. Try and develop that area as a point of trade. It's worked very well. We have about $40 billion when I last heard. That was about 3-4 years ago. It must be even more today. And we are building that equation. But we are not there. I mean, after all, between India and China, there is not much comparison. China is far ahead of us in terms of global trade. So it will not be able for us to match at the present stage China, but our presence is increasingly being felt, and that's a very good thing. Is there any other question?
We are needed lifestyle.
What? Lifestyle. Lifestyle, I think slowly we are expanding that area altogether. We are talking in terms of Ayurveda. Yoga has become, you have an International Yoga Day today. Our philosophy, that is the biggest thing that is happening, in the sense that the non-dualistic philosophy of India, which is free of religion, which is common to everybody and talks of only one reality, that is being increasingly accepted even in the West. And I am happy that one of the philosophers, not known in Trivandrum, but very well known in USA, is a man who started it. He was called Atmananda Krishna Menon. Hardly anybody knows about him. But he is the man whose philosophy is now accepted. It is what is called the direct path. So, and films are going everywhere. It is being dubbed in all languages. So that cultural exchange, that cultural influence is certainly taking place on a much larger scale. It will happen because India is a large country, and now that it is economically strong, it's been growing since 1990, 1991, even earlier. I mean, When people talk about restrictions in the early period, we had to do that. Perhaps we delayed removing those restrictions, but it had to be done at that particular stage. But certainly, as a growing economy, I think the culture will also grow with it. So those lifestyle changes you will find now all over the world. You have your Hare Krishna movement and many other movements. You have so many of our yogis sitting in USA. Any other question? No? There are many here also. Yes, yes. No, my main question with Mr. Mahumochi is he says India is Eastern Ethiopia. So I have asked him a question on WhatsApp whether he has got any literature, because Africa must be having literature of ancient literature. We know about the Egyptian literature, but Africa is the place where Homo sapiens started. Homo sapiens started. So certainly you must be having a lot of literature. But the piece he sent me LinkedIn message, that only is one statement by a man who shows in India as Ethiopia also. So that's the question I had, but I completely agree with him. India-Africa bridge, I think India has got a lot to give to the rest of the world. Just like I think China has to give a lot to the rest of the world. Yes, absolutely. We have to take both. I think it's a question of how we bring everything together, because there is culture, there is philosophy, even our philosophy. It is undergoing change and understanding. Science is coming into it. Physics is coming into it. So all those things, we need to be open. We need to be open in India. We need to be open elsewhere. And let's bring everything together and create a world that is happy for all of us.
Thank you very much. I think this session was indeed highly insightful. Of course, it is provocative. I know that you are left with a lot of questions, but I encourage you to go for lunch now and get back by 2 o'clock. Okay, let us give the panelists a big hand that they deserve. Thank you very much.
Very nice. Oh, okay.